to lights, cameras, data, leveraging smart technologies to reduce crime. We're excited for you to join today's webinar. With our webinar today, we've got two experts in a variety of fields, and we're excited to be able to share some of the latest information with you over the course of the next 45 minutes. Just a quick housekeeping note before we get started. You will have the opportunity to be able to ask questions throughout the presentation, so please send them using the Q&A function located at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar, and we'll be sure to cover as many questions as we can at the very end. Additionally, recordings of today's webinar will be available through a variety of places. You can certainly go to Pioneer Partners website is one of the places to get it. And with that, we'll go ahead and begin and start our webinar today. My name is Herb C. I'm with Pioneer Partners. I'm a senior partner, and Pioneer Partners really came out of Think Big Partners, which was started approximately 2010. During the course of that time period, we've worked in about 90 different cities throughout North America in the smart city master planning space. And one of the things that we say is without a city being a safe city, doesn't matter how smart it is, it really does not matter. So today's webinar is very important, and understanding how to leverage some of the most advanced technologies to be able to reduce crime is an important part of the discussion today. Additionally, maybe worth noting before I introduce the other panelists, I also have a little bit of a law enforcement background. I spent 4 years in law enforcement, so I'm especially excited not only from a standpoint of smart cities and law enforcement, but also as a human being and a parent. And we're all interested in reducing crime using technology. Additionally, with me, I'm very pleased to announce Mike Grigsby. Mike, would you like to tell them a little bit about yourself and Ubicquia?
Hey, thanks, Herb. Always great being on camera with you. Great topics to discuss. So, yeah, as you mentioned, I also have a law enforcement background. I was the division commander and de facto CIO for the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department from 2012 to 2016. I then served as the CIO for the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority from 2016 to 2018. And then worked for Cisco Systems, heading up their North America business development practice for smart cities. So I've been in that space for a long time, have worked around the crime reduction. Subsequently, I worked as the CIO for the city of Sioux Falls, South Dakota through COVID, which we saw, a lot of the civil unrest and how technology was able to assist a lot of different cities in that regard. So now spending time with Ubicquia, I get to enjoy staying in the municipal space and working with a lot of cities, a lot of metropolitans, a lot of counties, as well as their respective law enforcement partners or agencies within those communities. So this is a timely discussion. I think it's something that we've been kind of dabbling in for a lot of years, and here we are in 2024, really being able to see action around the discussions I know you and I have had, but certainly many cities have had going as far back as 2009, 2011. So happy to be a part of this conversation.
Thanks so much, Mike. And I know that Ubicquia has a special emphasis in certain areas, lighting controls, smart city platforms, a lot of sensors. You guys work in utility, but public safety, cities, campuses, parks, you name it. Ubicquia is really an industry leader in your field, so we're glad to have you on. Also, I'm very excited to have Mike Wooton. We've got two Mikes on the program today. Mike is with Leapfrog IoT. Mike, we'd love to know a little bit more about yourself. We're so glad to have you on today's webinar.
Thanks so much for having me, Herb. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. Mike Wooton. I've been in technology for over 20 years. I actually started back in the dinosaur days of the mainframe. And have been fortunate to stay in what I consider to be one step in front of technology throughout the 25 years. I myself have not spent time in law enforcement, but I did for a good period of time work with an organization that did parallel computing, fault-tolerant computing, and our primary customer was law enforcement, emergency services, municipalities who, fundamentally cannot have a second of downtime a year. From there, I was in the forefront of virtualization, spent basically the last 10 years prior to Leapfrog focused in helping organizations, municipalities, law enforcement with their digital transformation initiatives. So, when I looked at Leapfrog, I thought to myself, wow, this is an organization that has the ability to really change the game as it relates to safety, security, and how technology is leveraged to the betterment of our entire society.
Well, Mike, we're sure glad that you're here. I know that your background lends itself to so much of the discussion today, and I know that Leapfrog IoT, especially as an industry partner with Cisco, which obviously is a Fortune 50 technology industry leader in itself, you all specialize in a variety of areas, buildings, the built environment, public safety, video analytics. I'm especially excited to hear some of your thoughts on the big data discussion today, because as they say, data is the new oil, right?
Yeah.
So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So what's interesting in looking at the problem is that technology has been in use for years, and you've got different acronyms, ALPR being thrown around. You've got different lighting systems. You've got a variety of things in lights, camera, data. Data is equally as valuable. In fact, sometimes the software on the data is even more valuable, because once you install the hardware, it's up for quite a bit. And really the functionality that software and data can add to that installed hardware is exponential sometimes. So we're seeing a lot of uses of technology. In San Diego, as an example, there were street lights that were put up that were now made smart through lighting controls and through networking. But as we look at this, it's not just in the United States, it's all throughout the country and all throughout the world. In Asia, there's a lot of initiatives. In Latin America, there's public safety initiatives. But what's interesting is that AI is changing everything. AI is redefining and is probably the most breakthrough disruptive technologies that we've seen in our lifetime. And so navigating the future of policing using AI is on everyone's mind. Police Chiefs Magazine had a great article on it not too long ago. And if you were to think about the use of technology, technology really, really, really is an important piece. But technology is not perfect. One of the foremost industry leaders, ShotSpotter, they've been around for quite a while. That technology originally came out of the military through the triangulation using acoustical microphones in an array. But through that triangulation, it was able to be used to be able to detect the location of gunshot. But gunshot detection, just using microphones and the additional analytics, is not always enough. So while there are good results being obtained, it's not always enough. You've got to be able to do more. And so there's always going to be mixed results on the way to be able to improve technology. But technology is very pervasive. It's very prolific, among a lot of the different communities today. ALPR, or license plate recognition, that is a technology that now every major police department in the country is using. And they're using it to be able to have for community caretaking. Let's say somebody's gone missing. They're using it for investigations, be able to figure out who was where and when in their vehicle. Crime prevention, it's a great deterrence. And even for traffic compliance, if there's something that an officer needs to be able to understand, expired license plate is the starting point of that. You can't ingest all the information visually. We've got to be able to use systems like LPR to do that. And so it's very prolific. In fact, the impact of LPR is found to be very, very important. There's a 9.1% increase in the clearance rate of crimes. And if you look at some of on the right-hand side, the clearance rates to begin with, depending on the type of crime that you're looking at, a 9.1% increase is not insignificant. It is a huge jump. This is using and leveraging technology to improve public safety. So when we started looking at this and putting together this webinar, we really wanted to be able to take all the information and the questions that we've been hearing over the course of the last 5 to 10 years and being able to put them into a very concise 45-minute webinar. We're going to touch on these 6 topics over the course of the next 35 minutes. And with that, we're going to start right here. Understanding the cycle of crime is where we had to go as pioneer partners to be able to really get our arms around this. In fact, they've been trying to figure this out and trying to explain this in multiple dimensions. There's a human dimension, there's a built environment dimension, there's a technology dimension, there's a prevention, there's a deterrence, there's a prosecution. There's so many different ways to look at the life cycle of crime. But while there are a lot of good information out there, just like technology, there's an evolution and innovation, thinking that we needed to apply. In fact, the life cycle of crime, they've been trying to figure out a good way to be able to get our arms around this for almost 100 years. Back in 1929, there was a Cycles of Crime that was produced, and then the National Institute of Justice, different orientation. We continue to look at this, and it is, in fact, we think almost elusive. No one to include on today's webinar has any of this really completely figured out. It's constantly evolving, but the cycle of crime has never been published. I found this print to be somewhat interesting. This is from the late 1800s, talking about crime. Crime certainly has changed what it looks like today, but regardless, we've got to be able to define the cycle of crime to be able to understand how technology plays a role. So how do we do this? Pioneer Partners, in the course of doing smart city master planning, we've had to use design thinking, which really there are 5 stages of this to be able to identify how do we apply technology. And so Pioneer Partners, we use the first 3 stages of design thinking, the empathy stage, the definition stage, and the ideation stage. We really needed to understand the different stakeholders, what the problem looks like, how to be able to understand it through the dimensions of the people that are in it or being affected by it. And we did this through a variety of methods. In fact, there's a study that we have conducted for one of the top US cities over the course of the last year. We were contracted to be able to provide insight into creating a smart technology crime reduction plan, which will be released in Q1 of next year. And this report, along with a white paper, will really utilize our design thinking orientation to understanding the life cycle of crime and how do we assign technologies to reduce it. We interviewed countless people during the course of that project. We asked a lot of questions. We created personas, and we really had to reimagine a number of areas to include, beginning with the cycle of crime. And so the cycle of crime, as we define it for today, which is also in the report, which is also going to be in the white paper, is really in a couple stages. We define it by looking at the 12 o'clock position of being the stage that we want to be in the most. We want to spend the most time here, the prevention and deterrence stage. This is the place where no crime is occurring, but invariably when crime does occur, we've got to be able to look at the detection phase. That's one of the very first 6 phases, along with disruption, investigation, prosecution, and reimagination. It's a circular cycle. We looked at all 6 phases to return us then to the prevention and detection stage and understanding the correlation that they all had to each other. It's not enough just to prevent crime or detect it. We also have to be able to find enough evidence to be able to prosecute it. We have to do so fairly and justly. We have to make sure that people are treated without bias. And we also have to lean on key concepts like crime prevention through environmental design. So if you think about CEPTID, or crime prevention through environmental design, this is the use of the physicality of environments. Think about hedgerows or bushes. Think about lighting. Think about access controls on gates. Think about maintaining those gates or other things. But crime prevention through environmental design, along with some of these sociological dimensions, are what we used when we created the cycle of crime. But the most important thing that we would take away is that technology is simply a tool. It is a means to the end. It is not the end itself. So we had to understand in the course of assigning the technology that we had to get product market fit, understanding how does a technology create the desired impact based on the phase. If we're in the evidence collection phase, it has to be high quality, it has to be irrefutable. It's got to be presented in a way that is fair and unbiased, and it's got to be presented in a way that is going to meet the demands, the prosecution and the criminal justice system to be able to be applied, to be able to get a prosecution. But we really have to understand the correlation of all the different technologies and understand the impact. And then lastly, the one thing that we would convey here is that this is an interconnected system. What you will find as we go through these technologies, especially in the use cases, is that all the technologies then rely upon other technologies. So using design thinking, we'll unpack the detection phase here just for a moment. We have to understand, how is a crime detected? Is it the gunshot detection? Or maybe a camera picked it up? What type of crime is being detected? What is detected? Who is being alerted? How are they being alerted? When are they being alerted? All of these things are the result of design thinking. And as you start going deeper in design thinking, we have to understand, okay, what are the technologies that we have to assign that are going to satisfy these? So in the case of using crime detection as an example, we're unpacking gunshot detection technology, but it's also being impacted by cameras to be able to identify what type of activity is going on. Is there a license plate that we can get that's associated with a vehicle if the gunfire is coming out the window? Can we use surveillance technology to be able to positively identify people of who is committing the crime, who's pulling the trigger? And if we can understand also other sensors, where did they go once the initial detection occurred? But we also have to understand, where do we place these assets? If you apply the lens of crime prevention through environmental design, we can create entry points, ingress, egress points. We can control access, place camera systems and sensors at the right entry and exit points. We can enable the technologies through access controls. We can also use lighting to improve the resolution of these images. And of course, if we don't have a stable internet connection that's secured on the network, that's got good data storage, the ability to collect the data coming off these variety of sensors for future use, all of this is not going to be as effective as it can be. So looking at the environmental design and looking at all the different questions that you have to be able to satisfy, the design thinking overlay is actually a cycle in itself. That's a circular cycle, because you can keep unpacking questions upon questions. And this is the process that we use when we created this webinar and even the report and the analysis. We have to understand how are they going to be used, and in this case, from detection all the way to prosecution and every other important cycle in between or after this. They are all correlated. We have to understand, how does each cycle affect the next cycle? How is each technology interconnected to the other technologies? And how do we understand the entire cycle of crime so we can reimagine and analyze the data after the crimes occurred, reimagining the physical environment, the policies, the criminal justice system, what we need to get better prosecutions, how do we keep people safer, how do we minimize the crime, how do we take situational crime prevention and be able to apply that to be able to change the nature of violent crime to less violent when it applies? And most importantly, how do we create the longest state back to that 12 o'clock position? The result of this work comes out in recommendations like this. This is part of the report. There's a little bit of a preview. But the most important preview that we can give you today is actually unpacking some of these real life case studies, because without technology being applied in a very pragmatic understanding, it's a trade-off. There's a continued evolution of the technology. This is where we want to get to today. So we're excited now to be able to talk about some of these real life case studies. So first, Ubicquia has been playing a role in San Diego for quite a bit of time. Mike Grigsby, if you want to tell us a little bit about your case study and help us understand the pragmatic real life application of the technologies of how they're being leveraged to reduce crime.
Oh, certainly. Just as an even deeper segue into this, unpacking what you just shared, technology has been around for a really, really long time. And even if we go back to kind of the genesis point around smart cities, just kind of encapsulating that term, call it 2009, 2011, we're here in 2024 only now being able to leverage the technology in such a way as to unpack and kind of help reframe all of those questions that you just showed as going through that crime life cycle process, right? Until 2024, we did not have the amount of data that we have in our systems, in our storage now, to make really meaningful insights out of everything that's happening within our community. So it's all of this data that's been collected over time, even though we didn't have an understanding of how it would eventually be used, has set us up for where we are today. And this is another launching pad for where we're going to be in 2030, 2040, and 2050 and beyond. I don't know that I would love to say that we can, our end goal is to eliminate crime, but until we can get to the hearts and minds of everything, we can certainly put an emphasis on reducing crime and creating more opportunities for those people who are taking moments of opportunity to select a different path instead of taking a criminal path through that. So in a shortened version, that's somewhat what San Diego was after. You had already mentioned this kind of in the intro, but Ubicquia had a huge hand in helping San Diego get this particular project off the ground. They looked at license plate readers as a key component to helping them in their crime reduction initiatives. And they wanted broad scale deployment of those license plate readers across the city. As you can imagine, for a city the size of San Diego, there's a large land component that they had to kind of traverse to get that deployment out there. And while their initial partner, Flock Technologies, which helped them with the license plate readers themselves, they had a solution, a deployment solution. But Ubicquia was able to come back in, and through the technology of leveraging the existing street light network, we were able to help Flock deploy at scale almost on day one, be able to get at scale with over 500 license plate readers across the city. Now, that is an initial push to get the technology deployed. On the backside of that, the partners, Ubicquia, one of them, partners worked together with the San Diego Police Department to understand how they were going to take that information, take that data, and then kind of translate that into the meaningful insights, one that they're going to get of understanding what's happening in, across, and through their city. And then second to that, how are they going to train up their officers, train up their analysts, train up the people that would be ingesting this data, again, to make actionable recommendations, actionable responses, intelligent responses to what's happening from a crime-related component. Now, the city has, this was over a year-long process to get involved or to get this introduced. They are still in the process of, I want to say, kind of the early stages of this deployment, and they are collecting more and more data and more income, or excuse me, not income, but intelligence around what's happening in their city. And as they continue to move forward, the city is going to get smarter. The police department is going to get more and more intelligent data, and their responses are going to be shaped by that data that's coming in. So this is a huge component. And what I'll share about the San Diego project compared to the one that I'll talk about next is this is a direct interaction, kind of a direct deployment with police department. So we worked directly with the San Diego Police Department as part of their initiative. The second case study we'll see is a more indirect approach, but still has measurable crime reduction that comes out of that. So if we could go to the next slide. So I don't know why that one says San Diego, California. That should be Dallas, Texas. That was a quiz, see who got that one right. But in the city of Dallas, Texas, Ubicquia was also a key component into the initiatives that they were trying to do in, we'll call it a disadvantaged or an underserved neighborhood within the city. The Red Cloud neighborhood had been identified by the city as a target for additional deployment, additional services. And what they did was they focused that project through a public works lens, as opposed to directly working through the police department there in Dallas. So the public works, to kind of abbreviate the process that they went through, they looked at all of their scheduled public works projects for that neighborhood, streetscaping, water main replacement, sidewalk repair, street light replacement, and so forth. And then they kind of compressed the time schedule on that. Those projects were going to happen over a period of time, but they compressed the time schedule on that and did them essentially all at one time. While they were doing that, they overlaid technology on that allowed them to deploy cameras, license plate readers, as well as public Wi-Fi, some additional IoT solutions that were embedded in them. And what was interesting was, while that was an indirect public safety play, one of the first impacts that they saw as a result of that project was a reduction in crime. They're still pulling in the data. This was announced, they saw a lot of this in kind of the September timeframe last year, and they've been looking at and kind of measuring the results over time. We're going to continue to see that. One of the other things, as just a sidebar that they noted, and we don't have the specific data, but obviously we know that it factors in, is that they saw an increase in what I'll call neighborhood ownership. This is my neighborhood. It looks different. It feels different. Don't bring that kind of activity into my neighborhood. They saw an uptick in that. They also saw more championing of initiatives that the city was trying to do, as well as, again, kind of more crime reporting of what was going on, which ultimately resulted in a crime reduction. This is, I think, one of the things that was important during our ribbon cutting ceremony. There was one of the neighborhood residents mentioned that the city has done things before in their neighborhood, but this feels different. This looks different. And being able to deploy technology, I think that's a cue for a lot of city leaders to pay attention to, is that when you're deploying new initiatives, find out what is meaningful to the citizens, not just from a feedback standpoint, but understand what is meaningful to them in a sense of feeling safety or feeling that things have changed or the needle has moved in those respects. So Dallas has been a success. San Diego has been a success. Ubicquia has been deployed in over 800 cities with our smart lighting solutions. We're growing in our intelligent infrastructure from our grid management as well as our license plate and cameras and kind of smart city enablement from other IoT solutions. So there are many, many other case studies that we could talk about, but these were two that I thought were important to help people understand from both a direct interaction and cooperation with public safety and an indirect interaction with public safety. And if we could go to the next slide. So this is the technology itself, and I won't spend much time on this, but this is basically a managed switch that sits on top of existing streetlights. It's a plug and play solution that allows the city and the community to utilize additional technologies that go on top of this. So not only do you get the smart lighting controls, but you have the ability to plug in cameras or to plug in license plate readers or to plug in air quality sensors or noise sensors. We're also starting to see cities take advantage of this with wayfinding efforts and other curb management solutions that are out there. So this is a veritable Swiss Army knife solution that cities are able to utilize, to leverage their existing streetlight network. And as I've shared with so many other people, it allows you to get at scale on day one, just because of the breadth and kind of the quantities of streetlights that are in any given community.
Thanks, Mike. That was really insightful, and especially hearing a couple dimensions of trust you brought up, which I thought was really interesting. I know that today it's very difficult on everyone. You know, law enforcement, it's hard to perform their job. They're under-resourced. It's hard to be able to work. You know, a lot of good law enforcement officers and officials are operating absolutely to the best that they can, given what they have to work with. But trust works both ways, and good data, good technology helps improve everyone's safety and everyone involved in that cycle. So trust, I think, is a really important dimension there. So thanks so much.
Yeah, well, when I first became a police officer in 2005, the biggest piece of technology we had was a VHS recorder for our in-car camera recording, right? And look at what officers are utilizing now, the amount of data, the amount of technology, the amount of devices that they're having access to. We need to think about, cities need to think about, one, how the officers are interacting and kind of orienting around that, and two, how the citizens are interacting and orienting around that technology. So being able to share those kind of insights is one of the things Ubicquia really takes pleasure in being able to help cities with.
I remember the brick I carried. It was gigantic. So I understand. So very good. Well, thanks so much. Well, with that, why don't we dig even a little bit deeper here? I know, Mike Wooton, you spent a lot of time, you know, the data side is so important these days. Again, as we talked about, it's not just the hardware, but the software and the data. Why don't you take us through a little bit about how AI and data is really changing some of the things in the case studies that you've worked on?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm going to focus specifically on what we look at is trying to prevent early detection, prevention, as opposed to reaction. I'll take a step back. What we consider to be our flagship case study, our flagship AI model is gun detection. And we came together as a team. Prior to joining full-time, I was a board advisor with Leapfrog. In about 2021, if y'all remember the FedEx shooting and how that went down, someone was in a parking lot, got out of the car with a weapon, or they went in the building, went back to the car, got out with a weapon. They unfortunately shot a number of people before going back into that building and shooting additional people. We looked at that and we took a step back and we said, what's really going on here? So I'm going to throw some statistics out there. There's 120.5 weapons per 100 people in the United States. Year to date, there's been 480 mass shootings. There's been 479 people killed, and there's been over 2,020 people injured. What we looked at is we said, well, if we can actually detect a weapon in the parking lot, send an alert, have that alert validated by security. Upon validation, lock the building down, call 911, send emergency notification, get people to huddle in place. We can go ahead and prevent that active shooter situation from spiraling out of control. With our technology, that process of alert, validation, and the beginning of the lockdown 911 and the response to an active shooter situation is 5 seconds, maybe 10 at most. So this is really kind of a passion project for us. And what I'll say is we actually offer this use case free of charge. This use case can run on virtually any camera system that is an open API and leverage the RTSP feed. I won't go too deep down into the technology of it. But again, early detection allows us to prevent the crimes from spiraling out of control. The automated response further saves lives, and then fundamentally getting people to a safe place and law enforcement there in a much shorter period of time is really what we're going for. We have a variety of solutions that are associated to reduction in crime. Everything from suspicious behavior to fighting. So we cover a variety of things. And again, they can integrate with virtually any existing infrastructure that an organization has. We find that rarely do we see a homogeneous environment. So we've created this open platform, this open technology, so everybody can use it. Everybody can use it easily at a very low cost. Next slide. Something else we look at is we do what we do from a video analytics standpoint. There are other people out there that do that as well. And our philosophy is let's open up the platform, bring all data in. So data from every sensor, every device, camera, whatever it may be, bring it into a single platform, organize that data, create the opportunity to build advanced analytics and predictive analytics on that. So some of the things that we also do, emotion detection, age and gender, crowd. Historically, what we've seen in predictive policing is they're taking environmental and historical information, which is fantastic. Now imagine when you can layer in things such as the crowd, emotion. So what's happening with the people that are standing in that crowd? What's the age and gender? When you trend that data over the course of years, you realize that there will be significant patterns. We believe that that will help with drive staffing, community policing, strategies, things of that nature that, again, allow organizations to take that data that right now is very difficult to bring together, organize, and use, and make that simple, therefore providing a much more proactive approach to community policing.
Thanks, Mike. One question I've got for you, the ability to be able to look at that community policing aspect, that data, do you find that there's an appetite for people to be able to interact with the data? Is it growing? Is there trust in the data? Are they excited? Are they nervous? Do they understand how to use the data? And you look at community policing aspect? That's
a great question. I would say that everyone's excited with trepidation. I know that that might sound a little odd, but people are worried about privacy. They're worried about how the data is going to be used. So through anonymizing that data, we're able to put that at ease. But what they can do with it, and when they see the art of the possible, if you will, they get very excited.
Thanks so much. Well, that's really exciting and impressive. I know that all of the different technologies that we've talked about, none of them would be possible without also a good, strong network. What does that mean these days? Well, it's not just competing for bandwidth. It's got to be reliable. It's got to be rock solid. It's got to be low latency. The ability for the video analytics, the different technology sensors, the ability to be able to capture everything and then be able to transport that data securely to the cloud. You know, in that cloud, the ability to have the data interact with each other, append and enhance, create really intelligent data sets. And ultimately, if it can go on a blockchain, even better. But none of this would be possible without understanding we've got to be able to have edge computing occur, but we still have to transport data and the controls and everything's got to be interconnected. So that rock solid network is important. Mike, any comments on your technologies of the network? Have you all found the network demands to meet your needs, or are there any specific insights on top of the network?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. My time at Cisco, I think that was in building smart cities. I think that was the overall message that I was kind of helping cities understand is you've got to get your network in place now. These things don't work without the connectivity. Connectivity is king. And so what we're seeing now is a little bit, I think we're seeing the right orientation to which is the right connectivity. There isn't one overall or one, end all solution, connectivity solution, whether it's fiber backhaul, whether it's LTE, whether it's private LTE, whether it's mesh. There isn't one end all. You have to look at it situationally based and then understand kind of what the right solution is for that. We are seeing a large growth in LTE connectivity. It is starting to, all of the things that we saw were kind of limitations, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Those are starting to be overcome now. So LTE is really starting to be kind of a connectivity, a connection method of choice.
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct. And what I'll add is that we see, and I think this goes to your point, Mike, resiliency and simplified operations. Those two things we hear over and over and over and over because we do live in a connected world. So the second you literally have zero connection, that's a potential issue when there's a lot of reliance upon these technologies. Furthermore, as networks scale, and if you look at the statistics and the fact that thousands of sensors and devices are coming into the network every year, if not every month, being able to scale and operate that network easily, basically at the point of time is hugely important. So again, resiliency, scale, and simplified operations, which is one of the reasons why we have chosen Cisco as our primary go-to-market partner.
Well, I know that simplified operations, having that ability to digest a lot of information, that single pane of glass approach, there's so much coming at you. Simplifying it all to be able to make very rapid, insightful, and accurate decisions is critical. So thank you so much. There would be no network discussion these days without really talking about the vulnerabilities of the network, the threat detection, the attack surface is increasing. There's more bad actors that are trying to attack the network more than ever before. Data theft, ransomware, it's just a mess. But the one thing I'll just touch on briefly before we wrap up and go to Q&A is that data poisoning is a really interesting topic. Introducing bad data, purposeful, malicious bad data has really damning consequences. It's not just because it can create algorithms that then have unintended consequences. There was a study down in Florida to where there's a utility power plant where somebody hacked into the system. They're changing the salinization levels, which could have truly poisoned an entire community just based on water purification. But we're training LLMs in the AI world based on data, and it's not just one bad algorithm, but we're creating an entire realm of agentic AI agents that are performing complex tasks based on the training that we're giving them based on good data. It's such a complicated equation. So the cybersecurity layer, being able to work with technologies that got hardened, firmware, working with robust networks and hardware that's got really good rock solid, firewalls and things like that is really important for every provider that you have in the technology stack to really be aware of the threats. How do you fund this? This is a question that we hear a lot. What we'll offer is we're not going to read all the different ways, but we'll give you two different things to think about. From a federal level, what we've seen is the ability to piggyback technologies. As an example, SS4A, the Safe Streets and Roads for All. That's focused on reducing fatalities. It was based on Vision Zero, but the ability to be able to look at the same technologies that can detect somebody speeding can also be the same technologies that can have LPR installed on them. Being able to understand how to embed software on existing hardware and have multiple use cases is one way to be able to stretch budgets. So in the federal funding realm, it may change going into 2025, but we would invite you to be able to look creatively at different sources of funding and understand the correlation of the assets, could be network and foundational architecture, could be impacting layers, enabling layers, could be even just a study to be able to understand and how to assess your needs. But all those are important. But one of the most exciting things that we've seen came out of California here recently. Retail theft is really rampant in every major city. In fact, retail theft is affected in a lot of the different organizations to where they've changed inventory, they've reduced hours, they've created different access. But in October 2023, there was a study that was done, and 88% of the retailers reported that shoplifters are more aggressive. They're taking new tactics. We have to be more careful than ever before. We talked about gun detection. You not only have the presence of weapons, but you now have ghost guns. You've got all types of ways that people can introduce violence in the workplace. What's interesting about California and the 8 states and more that are joining and looking at organized retail theft, if you do not have a safe community, and the shoplifting isn't just shoplifting for shoplifting's sake. People are stealing guns, stealing cars, creating aggressive behavior. And what we're finding is that the use of technology is decreasing the severity of these crimes. And in the first 9 months following California's retail crime bill, 10,000 arrests were made. But it doesn't just stop there. Of the almost $250 million that were released, it's really impacted a lot of areas. It's also improved the ability to refer cases for prosecution. We've got to be able to get really good, solid evidence. We cannot have bias in the evidence. We have to make sure that the right evidence be presented at the right time. Even finding the evidence. Blockchain is an opportunity to be able to put evidence, into an area to where it is irrefutable, but also can be found. But even being able to understand, how do we enable everyone within the cycle of crime? All those different phases of the opportunity to be able to use some of the lessons learned, whether it's retail theft or homicides or murder rates or other Part 1 crimes. We all have to learn from each other. In fact, in one of the cities that we worked in, motor vehicle theft and breaking into vehicles, they were breaking in primarily to be able to identify and obtain weapons. And in the case of obtaining that weapon, 4 out of 5 times they were used then in the furtherance of another crime. And so we have got to be able to understand, how do we do this? And so out of California, some interesting things came out. It started with lights, camera, data, and AI, but advanced AI, introducing new types of voice and biometric, data into this, being able to look at all the different ways we can add and append the database through different collaboration between all the different agencies is really important. A little fun fact, the Tesla Sentry Mode is actually even being used. That front-facing camera that the Tesla has, they're now taking that footage and using that to be able to prosecute people, because that footage is like your Ring doorbell, and that video analytics that detects the motion and the resolution is so high that it's being proven to be a very effective tool that we can use. And that's another way of even thinking about federating new devices, federating the Tesla information or the Ring doorbell, but having these public-private partnerships between citizens, assets, federal, state, city, local, NGOs, whatever it may be, understanding how we all can learn from each other to be able to decrease the severity and the frequency of these crimes. So with this, emerging technologies, we wrap up, we're going to Q&A. There's a lot of innovation. I could fill 10 slides of this. What we're really excited to see, though, is that innovation is happening in all the different phases, whether it's helping the police do their job better, because again, they've got a tough job these days. They've got to utilize technology as a weapon, or it's the citizens, or being able to have the analysts. But we're going to focus on just a very couple quick ones here. The advanced analytics, body-worn cameras, being able to understand permissible use, the data, being able to look at the evidentiary trail of things that you can see. That camera can see things faster than the human eye can. Being able to ingest it and understand what it is one of the most exciting things. Route planning is another area. We found that there's studies that if you can randomize the route, you can actually take hotspot policing and the predictive aspects of policing, be able to randomize it, and route planning and the effectiveness can go through the roof. Access controls, biometric, it's retinal scan, it's handprint, thumbprint, it's even voice identification. These are all different innovations. Mike Wooton, tell me a little bit about data analytics and big data. Mike, you're on mute.
That would help. So if you look at just the explosion of data sources themselves, big data and analytics, predictive analytics, the more data you have, the more sources that data is coming from, the smarter and more accurate that predictive analytic is going to be. So we believe that, again, having that open platform that can ingest, it can ingest a feed from the Ring doorbells in your community if people wanted to sign up and provide those video feeds, to the sensors, to APs, everything. Having a single place to easily integrate, pull all that together, run your algorithms against it, and can let those continue to improve over time is going to lead to significantly improved predictive policing.
Thanks, Mike. Another thing that we're excited about on that predictive policing, once we make the predictions, we can actually move different technologies. LVT's got mobile technology that lights the camera, the deterrence factor, but also capturing the information. We can move it and randomize it and also put it where the crime is happening. It's not only a very cost-effective way for cities and communities to be able to help improve and reduce crime, but it's also really effective in being able to get new data aspects of that. Mike Grigsby, tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in the real-time crime center world.
I know we're short on time, but 2005, New York City was the first police department to really implement what we're now calling a real-time crime center. And since that time, over the last 20 years, there has been this quiet rise of real-time crime centers. More and more, I know that I spoke at the U.S. National Conference, as well as presented at the Canadian Real-Time Crime Center Conference. And looking at the questions that are being asked, we're starting to see more and more of these centers stood up in cities as well as metropolitans. I think the big thing to keep in mind is that, again, I mentioned this before, but in 2024, we now have the volume of data that makes these centers really effective, right? They're able to pull from a lot of different data points accumulated over a broad swath of time, and to make meaningful insights into that. And so as we start to see more cameras, more license plate readers, more devices that are able to feed data into that kind of that language model, we're going to see more effectiveness out of those real-time crime centers.
Mike, that's really exciting. I know those real-time crime centers provide an opportunity for the community in multiple different jurisdictions, NGOs, entities, agencies to be able to share information. That collaboration is really important, and that data plays that key role to it. A couple last things on the innovation front: virtual reality training, VR, being able to present situations that not only can we learn from, but also not have people be subjected to dangerous situations where they have to learn and have sometimes bad experiences. VR is an exciting area for everyone to learn from. We're also excited for the evolution of the criminal justice system. Be able to make sure that we continue to be able to be very sensitive to the privacy policies, the biases, make sure that technology has a right, implications and use cases, and make sure that we're constantly challenging and testing the technology to make sure it stays as a tool that's being used properly. The thing that I'm most excited about is that just as technology has evolved, crime has evolved too. The number of bank robberies goes down. Why? Because you can go on your computer these days and rob a bank without ever leaving your house. So the ability for innovation, design thinking, to be able to think of new ways to attack new problems and new crimes that are occurring is really important. So we've got to be able to continue to stay vigilant, to be able to have that cycle. With that, we're going to go to Q&A. I see 4 questions on Q&A. We'll get to 2 of them are a little bit duplicative. So we'll get to the questions here, but real quick as we wrap up, Mike Grigsby, any last final thoughts you especially want to convey before we go to Q&A?
Yeah, I would have to say, having been not only on the law enforcement side as a sworn officer, but then as a chief information officer on the municipal side, I would help to remind people that public safety technology is very effective, but the race for public safety technology is the Iditarod. It is not a 100-meter sprint. You have to focus in on what you're doing today, because that's going to set you up for where you're going to be tomorrow. And you have to understand that you're not going to get it right every single time. So try to kind of constrain the blast radius, if you will, for things that spin off wildly. But continue to press the envelope, continue to poke the box on new things, try out new things, but yeah, be in it for the long haul.
Thanks, Mike. Mike Wooton, any final questions or any thoughts before we go to Q&A?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I agree with Mike. It's a journey, not a sprint, leveraging technology for crime reduction. And, what we've seen to work well is to have a multi-year plan. and phase that plan. And don't eat the elephant in a single bite, but eat it bite by bite, so you can take your successes, build on them, learn from the challenging situations you find, but never give up. And don't also, what I like to say is, don't marry a bad idea. So as you go down this journey and you're deploying these technologies and you're executing on your plan, be open to what's come about, what's new today that didn't exist when you created the plan. What are some of the assumptions that didn't necessarily work out, but keep moving forward to achieve the end goal, which is crime reduction.
Thanks, Mike. My last thought before we move on to Q&A, and again, everyone, thank you so much for staying on. This is an important topic. We'll try and get to all the questions here. I think we can get them to 3. But my last final thought is, when we were doing our study over the course of the last year, we really took stock in understanding it's a holistic approach. Holistic can mean different people, different technologies, different agencies, looking at data that you don't even think is important to the overall equation and consideration. But that holistic approach, building a system or a platform, is everything. And it's going to require trade-offs. It's not going to be perfect. We have to have permission to be able to understand there's a human element involved at all times, but ultimately technology is that tool. It's human-centered design. We've got to understand the use case and the impact for the people is real. And so we've got to be able to understand how to leverage things properly. With that, I'm going to go to questions here, and I'm going to read them. We've got a couple good ones. One of the questions that rolled in is, which modern technologies have shown the most measurable impact on reducing crime? I'm going to ask both of you all that question. Mike Grigsby, why don't you go first?
I think this is, I get that question a lot, but I think it's kind of a 2-part question, right? There's the reduction of crime, and then there is the clearance of crime. And I think if you're not understanding both sides of that, you're kind of missing the bigger impact there. I spent 3 years with the FBI as a digital forensics investigator, and the technologies that we have available to us today to solve crimes is more complex and more effective than we've ever seen. And that the ability to solve crime and put somebody, kind of attach somebody as the suspect and do that effectively, that in itself helps reduce crime because people don't want to get caught. The other thing, just from a pure reduction, we're seeing this more and more. The more cameras that get deployed, the more license plate readers that get deployed, those 2 technologies right off the bat are helping reduce crimes. People don't want to be caught on camera. They don't want to be there. So as cities deploy more of that, they're seeing an almost immediate reduction of crime in those cases.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go ahead and raise it up a little bit. There's lots of technologies that come together to create a solution. And I think that solution overwhelmingly is predictive policing. There's a number of different studies that have been done that have shown a significant reduction. I'll go back to, this is early days, LA County or City of LA. They deployed in one jurisdiction. They saw a 12% reduction in property crime. Everywhere else in the City of LA, they saw a 0.4% increase. So I think, again, you bring together all the technologies that have been mentioned today, you create solutions, and those will reduce crime overall.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to, since you raised the bar, I'll raise it one last time, and I'm going to piggyback on both of what you all said. Cameras and data, to me, are probably the 2 most important modern technologies. Even understanding like the convoy aspect, if you have 2 vehicles that are traveling in the same place and time on a repeated basis, the ability to go through all that data set, to be able to understand that time and place and that correlation is really impossible to do if it wasn't for good video analytics, video as a sensor, and the ability to be able to ingest the data and go through unstructured data and structure it and be able to detect these patterns. You wouldn't solve so many of these crimes today. And so that to me is probably the number one. Another question that rolled in is, and we'll make this real quick, 2 last questions and a lightning round here. What's the biggest innovation that you see that you're most excited about? Same order, Mike Grigsby, then Mike Wooton.
Yeah, I can't say enough about AI, what that's going to do. There are pros and cons to it, but what artificial intelligence is going to be able to do inside of the systems that we already have. Again, I mentioned it a couple of times, right? it's 2024, and the volume of data that we have for artificial intelligence to go back and gain and kind of glean meaningful insights from, I think that's probably what I am most excited to see play out. Obviously, we've got to put the bumper guards on it, but I think AI has a tremendous opportunity to change the game.
Yeah, I'm going to go without question, AI, very specifically video analytics, based on training these models. There's fundamentally nothing you can't do. What limits what we do is our imagination, based upon the data sets, to Mike's point. So video analytics, unquestionably, in my opinion.
Thanks so much. I'm going to provide an answer and offer for more information one of the questions. Then we'll tackle one of the last questions that just rolled in. I think this is one of the most important ones that we can answer in this today because it covers so many aspects of technology. But the one I'll address real quick on the way is, wanted to ask if you have any partners in the world of concealed weapons detection, not metal detectors, but frictionless screening. Thoughts on the industry? There is so much that we could reply right there. What I would offer to the person who submitted that, email us. We're happy to be able to give you very specific vendors. There's a number of vendors that fall within that category. Frictionless screening, be able to create even the ability to have a Sally port entry to where you've got 2 different entry points to where you can actually have somebody detained if there's a weapon being detected, or even a chemical residue from gunpowder or things like that. There's so many ways you can approach this, and it's not a metal detector. So again, for time's sake, if you can email us, we're happy to do that. We'll also follow up with you. The last question that rolled in, and this is probably an important question on itself, just based on the question as stated, but I'll offer it. Technology always has implications. We've got to be able to manage technology, whether it's AI or whatever it is, to make sure that it's not being used incorrectly. The question is, how do we manage the bias? So technology is using identifiers towards Black and brown underserved communities. So again, how do we manage the bias of technology that can have unintended and negative consequences? We got to be very fair and real about being pragmatic. Either one of you want to tackle that question?
Yeah, I'll jump in with that one. That's a great question, and it's one I don't know that there is a definitive answer to it yet. I think we being public safety and certainly communities are still really pressing on that to make the technology behave the way that it should, the way we want it to. The biggest challenge, and this goes right back to what I was just talking about with AI, there is so much data that, for AI to chew on. The challenge is going to be that the data, the meaningful insights is going to reflect the way that we've been behaving already, right? So if our Black and brown communities have already been policed, or in some respects over policed, depending on the narrative there, that's going to feed into the AI models that are coming out of that. So we have to put the scrutiny on top of that and understand not just, I guess I'll shorten it by saying we can't just have the data come out and go with that as is. Like, we have to put the scrutiny, we have to put the human scrutiny on top of it. And this is why we don't have a definitive answer yet. We still don't understand yet how the human and the digital side kind of checks and balances occur, but we're working on it. I know task forces that are out there, committees at the federal, state, and local levels that are hammering on that problem right there.
Yeah, and just quickly, I'll add to that: rigor in training, meaning you have a model, rigor in training and testing that model over a long period of time to ensure that you catch those biases and program them out.
Yeah, we got to get that one right.
Yep, absolutely.
The last thing I'll add to that before we wrap is, again, understanding that everything is a tool. The tool can be used well, it can be used properly, it can be used poorly, and it can be used everywhere in between. But it does also, our skills in using these tools is evolving. And so it's up to us to be able to continue to include the human dimension, whether it's cameras, facial recognition, AI, whatever it may be. We've got to be able to make sure that we are very cognizant that it is an incomplete equation if we remove at this point in time, at least, elements of human interaction with the different tools to be able to solve the problems. It's an imperfect science. We've got to be able to make sure we recognize that. So with that, Mike, thank you so much, for joining. This is an important topic. For those of you that would like, we'd encourage you to be able to reach out directly to either one of them. We're also be able to happy to provide, contact information, but really this topic is near due to all of our hearts. We're all in this together. We appreciate everyone attending. And with that, thank you so much on behalf of Pioneer Partners, Ubicquia, and Leapfrog IoT. We'll wish you a great day. And thank you so much for attending the Leveraging Technology to Reduce Crime. The smart technology is only as smart as we as human beings can be. So lights, camera, data, AI, that's a wrap. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.